Greetings and welcome everybody to this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, and my partner, Dave Michels, on with me. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing grand,
What,
grand, just grand.
what country do you find yourself in today?
Today I'm in the U.S. of A. and having a good time here. Had a good pastrami sandwich here on the East Coast. Can't hard to do. That's hard to beat anywhere else in the world, actually.
Agreed. Yes, nothing like the delis around here. All right, so you recently wrote an article, and I'll put a link to it on the screen so people know what I'm talking about AI and Microsoft and Zoom. And I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking to you about that today. I guess before we start, we have to acknowledge the fact that, Microsoft's had a layoff or two or three or 1,000 or 9,000 or something like that. I mean, what's your take on that before we get too far into things?
You read the headlines and you see something like 9,000 people, whatever, just losing their jobs. Obviously bad news, and then you what is going on here? And then you read the next sentence, and it's like 2% of the company, or not. I don't think it was that high. It was actually a very small percentage of the company. So not too surprising. I think what's actually kind of interesting is the dance, and we're going to see this dance a lot. But the dance is that AI is not taking your job, but you need to be more efficient with AI so that we can reduce our headcount. And so there's a little bit of a dance there that's going on. And Microsoft has, said very clearly, no one's job is being replaced with AI. But they also said in that very same conversation that with fewer people, employees are going to have to become more efficient with AI. And so it's kind of a little, Twilight Zone-ish. We'll leave it at that.
Well,
A little bit.
let me be the devil's advocate just for a second. The cuts that Microsoft did were across the globe and across the board. That means people that were working on CoPilot and people that were working in their AR space were also affected by this. So it's not like AI, the money is being shifted from non-AI resources to AI resources. This was I don't want to say indiscriminate, but indiscriminate cut across the board.
Yeah. No, but this is the dance, and it's not even just an AI dance. It's the technology dance that we've all been dancing to this song for most, at least most of my career, and most of your career is twice as long. But the dance is something along the lines of you buy this technology, and then with the amount of time that your staff will free up, they can do more important things. But of course, that's not really the way it plays out. The more important things were getting done before just fine, and the stuff that wasn't so important, nobody cares about, and so we get rid of the staff. And so, and this has been going on, since caveman era, right? One of the best articles I read on this had to do with comparing the housewife's job, or whatever, of the '60s or whatever, and we keep on improving. We got vacuum cleaners, we got dishwashers, we got iron. So now it's like it takes no time to clean a house. But meanwhile, our houses have gotten bigger and cluttered with crap that we keep buying because and it's just there's just stuff everywhere. And so the days aren't getting shorter. Our work week, we've been inventing technology, at least in my career, for a long time, and yet the work week remains the same despite all these huge improvements. So we're seeing this dance again with AI, and companies are looking to pay money for AI, and they want to see some efficiencies, and there's going to be some reductions. That's just but nobody will actually say it that simply, right? It's more about now you can do more important things.
Well, I still think it's an Ouroboros. Still think the tech industry are letting go people, the very people that use their product. So let's get back into the article that you wrote right now. And I've been looking for the best analogy, and I've been struggling with it as we've talked about to figure it out. But I think it's kind of the difference between ready, aim, fire, and ready, fire, 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 aim. And you kind of explained a lot of that. Why don't you get into it first?
Well, okay, so we're going to talk about what the article's about. I don't think we've actually said what the article's about. So the article had a headline of Zoom delivered what Microsoft inspired, and the article's about Microsoft Copilot and Zoom AI Companion, and and basically, you and I have been very critical of AI in general, and but it's obviously something to it, right? It's obviously building more and more users. You and I, admittedly, as much as we hate to say it, are using it more and more in our day-to-day workflows. And so there's something there, but we're not quite sure what it is. And we've criticized Microsoft because, as you said, fire, fire, fire. They have lots of different attempts of what they think it is. And we've criticized Zoom for possibly over rotating on it. And so that's not what this is about. This article was about that the realization that that Zoom has actually delivered a pretty powerful solution, and I realized they've delivered what Microsoft kind of sold, and I think they've done a better job at delivering it. And so there's a lot going on there, a lot of different pieces. The article is actually pretty jam packed with a lot of stuff going on there. So there's a lot of moving parts. But if you think about Microsoft and Zoom, if you just compare the companies, right? Zoom still has, it's hard to call a public company that was 20 years old now, a startup, but still has a bit of a startup feel, right? The founder is still there, and they're still innovating at a different scale than most companies. There's still a lot of fire at Zoom. Microsoft is, one of the biggest companies on the planet, right? And extremely diversified, extremely global. They've got more irons and more fires than we can even possibly count. And it's just amazing how big that company is. We just talked about this huge thousands of people losing their jobs, very minor percentage of the company. So, and Microsoft's got so much going on. We often, because we're old, we often think of Windows and operating systems, and of course there's applications. Then there's this whole Azure thing. There's this whole Bing thing. There's this whole games division. I mean, it just goes on. They make hardware now. I mean, it just never really quite ends. This Microsoft thing just keeps on. This onion just keeps on being peeled. And Zoom, on the other hand, they've been broadening their portfolio. They've gone from just meetings to telephony to events, and now they call it workspace. And they're really trying to fill out that knowledge worker portfolio, but still relatively, I'm going to say laser focused compared to Microsoft. And so I think that's the key here. I think, your analogies that you were throwing out there, I'm going to say Microsoft has no choice but to use a shotgun. They're trying to appeal to every vertical. They're trying to appeal to consumers. They're trying to appeal to business users, enterprises, international, you name it. And as a result of that, they've come out with a number of copilots. I think you've been very vocal about the number of copilots.
Well, we'll give the appreciation to Kevin Keeler for being the official keeper of the Copilot count.
I actually went through, and there's 12. There's 12 different copilots you can buy right now. And some of them are basically free. Some of them you can buy. Some of them, I didn't realize this, have a year-long commitment. You can't even try it. I mean, you have to sign up for a year. And that's because they have all these different, demographics they're trying to reach. They're also, as I've mentioned, some of these cost a lot of money. And Microsoft will justify that in productivity gains, et cetera. But there's a fee. Now, Zoom, on the other hand, has one. It's called the Zoom AI Companion. And it's included in all of its paid plans. And that's a very different approach right off the bat, right? So Zoom is basically saying, we believe generative AI is so important that it's important to workflow, everyone should have it. And Microsoft is saying, well, some people should have it. The haves and the have-nots. And so that changes the way these things get deployed. But I
would also point out and ask your opinion. That's all completely right, but you've heard the old expression that just because you're paranoid doesn't mean somebody isn't out to get you. There is that the feeling that Microsoft has so oversaturated, well, there's Copilot this and Copilot that, and which Copilot and where. They may be all as useful as Microsoft is saying they are, but people may just simply be holding their heads and screaming at this point because they're too confused by which one to use and what's the price and did it change and I don't want to hear about it anymore.
It's not only that, but it's also the general confusion that most people don't know how to use AI, right? We didn't learn this in school. It's all being thrown at us. We hear it from our bosses, you better figure out how to use AI, but they're not giving us classes. They're not giving us direction. There's no manuals. There's no classes. And so it's like, there's this stress that I need to use it. I need to figure it out, but I don't know how. And so you ask your company, what are you providing? And the companies are providing various tools. And so there's this, well, which one? And when there's 12 of them, which one do I use and how do I use it? And I think there is kind of, I think, this evolution that we're going through. And at this point of the game, and we've talked about this a lot, David, at this point in the game, what do you use AI for? It really boils down to not that many things, right? We know that its core competency is summarization. It's great at summarization. And so great. But it actually turns out to be very impressive how many things we can summarize. At first it was, for you and me, it was probably meeting summaries, what was the meeting about? But, summarize my email, so summarize my inbox, summarize the conversation I had on the phone call, summarize, the stack of reports. We can summarize anything, it seems like. And so the summarization seems to be the killer feature of generative AI. We're also learning more about composition, and so it can create draft emails, draft documents, draft presentations, make images, outlines, etc. So composition is becoming very important.
And it can also turn a bad writer into a good writer. It can take garbage and it can make it sound like it's Shakespeare.
There's some of that, and the way it does that, has to do with the paid plans and the free plans, is how much of your own data it can leverage. Wonderful article about a guy that had AI write a birthday card for somebody, I think using Google Gemini, and he was astonished at how personal the card came out, and the card was just complete. I mean, and it turns out that Google knew who the contact was from his contacts and from his emails, and was able to reference very specific things in the email conversations. It was like a very personalized. And so the question is, how much of our data do we give AI? And that's what that's probably the biggest thing why Microsoft has 12, is some of them have access to corporate data, some of them don't, some of them, and in certain applications like Dynamics and stuff has quite a few different buckets. But anyway, so the thing that we're just starting to tap with is being able to query across multiple documents and emails. We're starting to figure out how to customize. I was just talking about with maybe dictionaries or custom skills, which was the agentic stuff. Can you do this for me? Manage my calendar. Zoom has a agentic where it will manage, find a time and book a time where we're all available. So white automation is in that. And the last thing that we use it for is kind of the first thing I think most people would think of is basic internet research and using it as a research tool. And so that's kind of what we're using AI for right now. And when I looked at the Zoom AI companion, I realized they're really nailing it in all of these areas very nicely. And I looked at the Microsoft CoPilot, and there's just, you've touched on it, but there's so much confusion. And part of it is, they've renamed everything. Part of it is the pricing capability issues and which ones are free. Part of it is the fact that it's based on OpenAI and only OpenAI, and OpenAI is also a competitor, and people can buy OpenAI directly. So how is OpenAI different than Copilot? And it turns out to be not that different, and some customers prefer OpenAI because they're using it on the consumer side, and it's just got more familiar to them. And so, and Zoom didn't do that.
Let me interrupt you and ask you, isn't Zoom using a federated version of AI as opposed to what Microsoft's using?
Yeah, so Microsoft is only using OpenAI, and that's actually creating part of the confusion, right? Because you can get OpenAI directly. And where Zoom is using a federated approach, where they have OpenAI, they also have Anthropic, they also have their own AI, Zoom AI, which is based on the Meta open source stuff. And so you don't get all three. Basically, Zoom is optimizing which one is best at what. And so depending on the task and the questions and the prompts, you'll get one of the three. But you're getting a different result than you're just the one, which is, I think, a significant thing that is working for Zoom. And Zoom is also, optimized it around its suite. And so obviously it starts off with meetings and summaries and stuff like that. But it can write, and Zoom introduced Zoom Docs. It can do tasks and action items, and that's why they have Zoom Tasks now. It can go through your emails. That could be Outlook email if you want it to be. It can do team chat because Zoom's got a nice Zoom chat, team chat solution. And and they've even got, Microsoft doesn't have this. They even have for Zoom calls and tracking action items, and Microsoft doesn't do that one yet. So all that is basically included in the cost, and it's fairly intuitive. Zoom's also got in-app kind of prompts, change your tone, and how would you like to simplify this? And it's also got the chatbot UI, so you've got both UIs available to you. And they've really done a pretty impressive job with, the agentic stuff, with the reasoning and the tasks and the orchestration. So, and it works with Microsoft SharePoint as well. So you can bring in your corporate documents. So I think Zoom's done a really good job. And meanwhile, you know, obviously Microsoft is a very powerful and very capable company. They can do whatever they choose to want to do. But they choose to do a lot of things, and so they're fighting antitrust in Europe. They're fighting the cloud dominance. They're fighting Bing dominance. They're fighting they're trying to develop AI on their own. I mean, there's just so much going on at Microsoft, and where Zoom is just kind of like, hey, why don't we do this? Let's try this. And I think that's what that article is pointing out, is they delivered exactly what Microsoft had kind of envisioned, and
Well, would you
yeah.
consider either product a success right now, like from a financial standpoint or from a human standpoint? Is anything a success, or is it just still the middle of the race and we're comparing the two strategies?
We're nowhere near the middle of the race, but it all depends on what you mean by success. And so, if you're paying for it as an end user, then you're looking for an ROI. And if you're not paying for it as a user, then that ROI is pretty much instant. So Zoom wins on that one, hands down, right? If you're defining success around the model, I mean, is Zoom making money at this? Is OpenAI making money at this? Is Microsoft making money at this? I don't know, but I think I think the answer is no. But and so that's kind of unopened. But we also know that we also know that these models are evolving very quickly, and they're getting better. And so, do we have a choice? Do we have a choice about when we're going to use this technology? And we can't wait for it to be ready, right? We have to start using it now. And so and we're using it more, certainly in our writing, I'm using things like Grammarly, and I'm using even Zoom and Gemini to help with punctuation and grammar. I know that you had a question before we started recording, and you went to ChatGPT to pull up a quick answer. So we're using it more and more, and I think that's really important. And so
Yeah.
success, that's a tough one to define.
So when I was watching an old movie, one of my favorites a couple of days ago, I was curious. I knew it was very old. How many of the cast were still alive? I know that's morbid, but I really wanted to know. So I asked one of my AI assistants to list out the top 30 members of the cast and tell me which ones were alive and which ones were not with us anymore. And I was stunned that, literally like 6 out of 30 people were still left. Everybody else was gone. And I would never have been able to do that research in just a Google search. I would have to
No,
figure out
it would
who
be
listed
multiple
it and
searches, right? Yeah,
right. It
yeah.
would be multiple searches. It's aggregating the search. It's summarizing the search. So you're totally right about that. That's a good article. Let me put the link up over here for anybody who hasn't read it yet, because I think it's an important thing to talk about. Where, as you point out, I was saying we're not at the end. You're saying we're not even at the middle of the AI conversation yet. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on, and we should all be dipping our toes in it, just very carefully. I had a wonderful comment on one of my posts a couple of weeks ago where somebody said, I think the blah, 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 blah. And then the last line of the post is, would you like this to be more pointed or more soft? And clearly that was a line that somebody either left in when they manually transposed it, or maybe it was a bot all the way to begin with. But the problem with AI is when you trust its output without checking it. And that's what we
Yeah.
all be careful about. So, well,
More pointed, I think is the answer.
more pointed, more obviously with me, more pointed. So where are you off to? What's your next thing after this?
Well, today, I'm at the Amazon AWS event in New York, which is a interesting event. Talk about a diversified big company. I mean, this is ridiculous. Um, uh, Tomorrow, I'm flying out to the Zoom analyst event, which will be interesting. I wonder if my article has been read by anyone at Zoom.
It's
And
actually been shared by people at Zoom if you
Yeah,
haven't
I
seen
think a
that.
few people have seen it there in Zoom. Yeah, and And then I'm going to try to make the most of being in California. So I've got a few other meetings lined up, and I see I'll see Kid Two in California, which is great because I saw Kid One here yesterday on the East Coast, and then back to New Jersey for some more meetings back here. So.
Dave, thank you for taking the time. Really do appreciate it. And thank you very much for watching as you do every week. We'll see you on next week's show. Take care.